Okay, let's read the title heading to Genesis chapter 49, Jacob's dying blessing, prophetic of the tribes of Israel. And then look at here at the last line, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Talk about the last days, judgment, our time now. Now, as you see, compared with what we read in Ecclesiastes concerning what was seen in the place of judgment, that wickedness was there. It's going to be very easy to tie up this wickedness to another verse that describes Cain as that wicked one, or who was of that wicked one. This tracing this back to Cain is going to trace us back to the sons of God of Genesis 6, which will further bring us back to Dan as being a mighty man, a men of renown, a men of old. Dan meaning the tribe of Dan, the entirety of Dan. If you use Samson as the example, Samson was a mighty man of great strength. And then you have to remember that the descendancy of the sons of God of Genesis 6 were all quoted as being mighty men, men of renown. They ended up being the offspring of the union between the daughters of men with the Anunnaki, the sons of God. Their descendancy became known as the Nephilim. Dan, in symbol, represents that descendancy of these ancient mighty men. And this is why you see Dan is being represented as a judge, even being further paired with the symbolism of the serpent. Because if Dan is being represented with the fallen one, he would be paired with what made them fall, and that would be the serpent symbolism from Eden. Just like all of the Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonian gods are serpent symbolized, just as well as those in Mexico, Mesoamerica, South America are all symbolized by the serpent also. So it's the same connection, it's the same agenda. We see it all the way through to Dan. Now, if you want to know more about Dan and his occultic connections, you would read the book of Judges to see that Dan has fallen unto idols, that Dan has fallen unto occult practices. And then you time this up with what we see here, that Dan will be symbolized as a serpent judge in the last days, and it's not too hard to figure it out. But if you are having a hard time figuring it out, then we would simply go to chapter 33 of the book of Deuteronomy. And then there we will see further help to solidify exactly who this Dan is. And out of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. All right. Well, this land of Bashan, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, is once again associated in the last days. This is going to be Moses's dying blessing, basically, to the tribes in the last days, just like you saw previously Jacob. So think about this. These are some of the most, if not the two most important Hebrew patriarchs giving their prophetic visions for what they see for one of, basically in Jacob's eyes, one of his grandsons, one of their family members, what they see happening to them or becoming of them in the last days. And both of them are quoting Dan as being a judge, and a judge of a peculiar nature. Now, Dan was associated previously in Genesis with this serpent as an adder by the way, in other words, by the path. And what we're going to understand is this path that he's trying to block is the path to the understanding of Jesus Christ as the true Messiah. So now we see Dan is leaping forth from Bashan. Well, in biblical terms, this Bashan represents the land of the giants. Now, that's exactly what the offspring of the sons of God with the daughters of men are called, as it translates further to Nephilim, meaning giants or mighty men, men of old, men of renown. So Dan, being a judge in biblical terms, is being stated as leaping forth in the end times from the land of the giants, which ties him up perfectly with our understanding of Ephraim in the last days via the vision of Hosea. So at this point, think about what you're seeing. The biblical proof is that Jesus Christ is not judging us in physical in these last times, what we see happening all around us, that everything is related here to this serpent tribe of Dan. I'll be back.